I've had some students ask me what it means when they get feedback from a journal or from a professor that your writing just isn't academic enough. So really, what does it take to publish academic writing, or what does it mean when a editor or a publisher refers to academic writing? Now, what you'll get when you are in junior high or high school, at least in the American system, is basically what you see on this word cloud here, which is a good start, but it's really not what publishers or professors in a doctoral program mean when they say academic writing. What we mean in junior high and high school is, is there standard grammar? Um, was the punctuation, the referencing, the quoting done correctly? And then just the basic things of, did you have a purpose, a thesis, was it organized? And those are important, of course. If it lacks any of those things, then you don't have, a paper that's of good academic standards. But really, there's a number of other components to having a journal article or a dissertation of good academic quality. And so I have this pyramid here, and it shows how to have an academically robust article or dissertation, it needs to have a number of components all found within it. It reminds me of the dessert strawberry shortcake. In America, we have a dessert where there's a pastry, like a cake, a round cake, just a single individual serving, and then some strawberries and ice cream and whipped cream on it. And when you see it, you recognize it as strawberry shortcake. And if it's missing one of those components, if there's no strawberries, or if there's no cake, or if there's no cream, it's just not strawberry shortcake. Um, so you need all of the components in there, to make it recognizable, to make it what it is. And so in this case, uh, I think I have this pyramid has a number of components required for something to be academic writing. Now, the first one is really what that word cloud showed. What we learn in junior high and high school is you need to have good standard English usage in your article or in your dissertation. And I really don't think that that's what our graduate students are struggling with, or that's probably not your problem. If you have an editor, if you've proofread it, um, yeah, or if you have a good command of English, then that's probably not what the editor or the professor meant when they said this is not good academic writing. So if it's not that, then it must be one of these other components on here. And so let's look at some of the other ones that you probably weren't introduced to in your high school English classes. One is that, and an editor wouldn't come out and say it this way, or a professor wouldn't necessarily say it this way, but what they mean is you didn't use the jargon within our field. So what you need to do is you need to recognize what are the buzzwords, the current hip words in your discipline. If you're in anthropology, what are the words that mark you as within the discipline of anthropology? And when you pull out a article or a book by a anthropologist, you can see that it fits squarely in that discipline if they've used that jargon correctly. And the same would be true with theology, and it's true with intercultural studies, and it's true in the field of education. And so you may be able to say the same thing in a different way, but it would mark you as outside the discipline. You haven't been reading their articles, you haven't been going to their conferences. And so you need to show that you're using their jargon and using it correctly, not just throwing in the words. So you may have standard English, but it's too simplistic, or it's using the jargon from the wrong discipline. You might be using the jargon from education, but trying to publish in a theological journal, or the other way around, or using the jargon of evangelical Christianity in a mainline journal or something, and so you're not using the correct terms that would mark you as being an outsider. Okay, and another related to that is the command of the central theories, and so you need to show that you know the development of this discipline of the last 50 or 100 or 150 years. So it doesn't mean that every academic article that you do, in anthropology needs to start with Tyler and Morgan from 150 years ago, and then go through the history of the development of the discipline, from Boaz to Malinowski up to the present day. It means that when you use the theories, you use them correctly, and that at least that you at least fit within one theoretical framework in that discipline. What theory in education or anthropology or theology or history that is recognized within that discipline? Which of those theories does your paper seem to be interacting with, and do you have a good command of that particular theory? Okay, another is your article actually unique, or is it just reporting established ideas? If you're doing something on intercultural adjustment and all you do is summarize what Lingenfelter and Edward Hall said, and and you just go, it may be written well, it may be using the right standard or the right jargon. It might you might be correct about all of the synopsis of the previous theories, but if you're not reporting on original research, that you've gone out and found out something new, or if you're not organizing it in a new and unique way, if you're not coining a new word, or not making a contribution, then the editor might be tempted to say, it's just not of academic, not high enough academic quality. Okay, the next is tone and style, and I do run into this problem in dissertations and graduate papers quite a bit here at Biola, and that is the tone. For some students, they prefer to write as if they're talking to a friend, and that may be a great way to get your words down on paper. But then you need to go back and change that tone and style. You need to have just the right amount of authoritative tone so that you're not hedging, you're not just marking other people as scholars, but you're marking yourself as a scholar or an authority. You may not be comfortable with that, but by lacking that tone and style, you're marking your paper as a non-academic paper. And so that may be the problem when an editor says that it's of not academic quality. So what do I mean by that? Now, having the right tone and style does not mean putting everything in the passive voice. Okay, some people think that if their paper all of a sudden has a lot of passive sentences like research was carried out and the following discoveries were made. That is not actually what I mean by formal tone and style, even though in American English we think of the passive voice as formal. Actually, I suggest you avoid the formal voice entirely, and APA suggests or requires that you avoid the formal voice. Instead, the tone and style means that you're not doing a lot of second person. You're not saying you need to understand, or in order for you to adjust well cross-culturally. You're avoiding the second person, starting sentences with you or using you. And you can use your first person point of view. That's perfectly fine. But you want to avoid American slang, and maybe you want to avoid a bit of a preachiness. That would be the wrong style. Those are some examples of the wrong style. But if you do get feedback from an editor that it's not of academic quality, that could be the problem. Okay, another is it up to date? Does it toe the party line? Now, I've mentioned this with the jargon, and with understanding the theories. If you are making an argument based on research that's 40 years old, it may be, the editors may say it's not of academic quality because it's not acceptable by current standards, because nowadays people's ideas, their paradigms, their ways of thinking about the world have changed. Probably the best example is that to be published in most academic journals in nowadays, you would have to approach it from a more postmodernist, from a more critical standpoint. And by critical, I mean where you're anti-establishment in a way, or you recognize the voice of minorities. You're not. So toeing the party line does not mean in line with arguments that were made 50 years ago. It means in line with the arguments that are made today. So you may not like the idea of having to toe the party line, or of having to just, to be in sync with the current modern trends in scholarship, but by not situating yourself there, you're going to have a harder time publishing. So in a way, it may feel like a compromise to you, but you need to be in sync with where your colleagues, with your peers are, and to have some sort of commonality in their way of seeing things in order for them to accept your paper. Okay, another is the organization, the transition, the thesis. Did you argue a thesis from beginning to end? Did each paragraph, okay, this gets a little bit more nitty-gritty than just what you might get in junior high or high school. Does each paragraph move along your research question, the point that you were trying to make? Is each paragraph cohesive? And is there a transition from paragraph to paragraph that says, now that you've talked about this, the next logical thing is to talk about the next thing in the next paragraph? And so that may be the problem in your paper if it's not of high enough academic quality. Is it complex? And by complex, I mean, have you reduced, if you're doing a study on Latinos, have you reduced all Latinos to one simplistic idea? Or have you recognized a plurality of complex issues, that there's political issues at play, and theological and social issues and emotional issues? Have you recognized the complexity of theories at work, rather than making simplistic arguments of, just saying here's the way the world is, or all people behave this way? Do you recognize the complexity and the plurality? And then the last one is are your claims substantiated or believable? So you may have a very cohesively written paper in good standard English using the right theories, using the jargon, but your original claim is something that when people set it down, they say, well, I just don't think you argued it. You may have made some claim that reading more actually gets people, a better job eventually, and then you make some, a cohesive argument through the paper, but in the end, you never actually showed a connection between reading and getting a better job. So these are some examples of what we mean by academic writing, and you need to pay attention to each of them.